Ukraine has just brought the war to Moscow. In a series of crushing drone strikes, Ukraine has shut down airports and caused massive damage to Russia's capital, leaving Vladimir Putin asking a question: what comes next? Here's what we know so far. The Kyiv Independent provides an overview of the latest Ukrainian strikes in its July 20th report. It says that overnight on July 20th, Ukraine unleashed a horde of drones into Russia, many of which targeted Moscow. The attack started at 6 p.m. local time, with Moscow's mayor, Sergei Sobyanin, claiming that his city had endured strikes from at least 21 Ukrainian drones. As usual, Russia claims to have shot practically all of the drones down. Sobyanin said that emergency crews were heading to the scene in all locations where the drones were downed, with Russia's defense ministry claiming that its air defenses shot down 93 drones during the evening. 19 of those 93 were shot down over Moscow, it claims, suggesting that only 2 of Ukraine's drones managed to get through. However, the ministry also claimed to have shot down 16 en route to the city, along with another 8 once day broke. The numbers don't add up, and that's pretty typical for Russia. The reason the numbers don't make sense is that Moscow is trying to hide what really happened. As Russia's defense ministry claims to have taken out the majority of the drones, fires are raging in the streets of Moscow, and all of the city's most important airports have been shut down. Vehicles are burning. Even residential buildings appear to have been struck, either by drone debris or indirect attacks. Moscow's defenses were breached. Far more details come from News Sky, which broke down Ukraine's strike in detail on July 20th. It says that news started breaking of Ukraine's attack at around 2:45 a.m., leading to dozens of Moscow residents taking to messenger services to report that they could hear and see drones exploding around the city. Flashes of light covered Moscow despite there being no thunderstorm, with at least 7 of the city's districts being affected. The videos started surfacing soon after. The Sun's YouTube channel shows footage of drones streaking through the skies, exploding as they hit their targets. Fires were recorded on the streets, with vehicles burning near the Oko business center. The Kutyevo Novoseltsy district saw plumes of smoke rising above houses, with broken glass in Barvisa district offering yet more signs that Ukraine's drone strike was far more effective than Russia claimed it to be. According to News Sky, most of the strikes took place within around 6,500 feet of Russia's key logistical and transport facilities. Among them were the airports. Ukraine's strike achieved something that hasn't happened since April 2024, the closure of all 3 of Moscow's most important airports simultaneously. Vnukovo, Domodedovo, and Sheremetyevo were all closed down, forcing flights to be delayed or diverted to other cities. The Sun says Russia was forced to divert around 134 planes, with News Sky adding that at least 60 flights were delayed, leaving thousands of passengers stranded at Moscow's airports as the Ukrainian drone strikes raged. In Vnukovo, direct damage to nearby cable lines and fuel supply systems forced such massive disruption that planes were forced to circle around in the air for more than an hour before they were finally diverted to other airports. The result was the worst disruption to Moscow's aviation over the past year. The BBC says that Russia's Association of Tour Operators claims that Ukraine's strike caused airports to close down 10 times over a 24-hour period. And this isn't the first time that Ukraine has forced these sorts of closures. Back in May, the BBC points out a similar Ukrainian aerial bombardment caused enough airport closures to leave 60,000 passengers stranded after Ukraine launched 500 drones at Russia in a single day. This isn't an unintended side effect. These airport closures are a strategy, as we'll explain later in the video. News Sky reports that Ukraine employed a swarm tactic in its recent drone operation against Moscow. As part of this strategy, some unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, were launched from remote regions, allowing them to approach the city by taking less predictable paths. To further complicate Russian air defense efforts, the drones used a cascade of false routes designed to mislead and overwhelm the defensive systems, effectively bypassing traditional interception measures. Russia reportedly deployed Moscow's stationary air defense batteries, including Pantsir S-1 and S-400 systems, to destroy Ukraine's drones. The country also deployed pulsed radio jamming to attempt to send Ukraine's drones off course, a first for Moscow, along with using drone interceptors. None of it worked. Ukraine's drones still broke through. As for the Russian reaction, News Sky said that both Telegram, Instagram, and X were flooded with panicked posts showing videos from the scene. Reposts and chatbots filled Russian feeds with news of the attacks, prompting the Russian prosecutor's office to warn against users spreading disinformation, slander, and panic posts on social media. Translation: stop telling Russians what's really happening in Moscow because Putin doesn't want anybody to know about it. The office also told journalists that they should only disseminate verified data. Again, Russia was trying to hide the scale of the attack. Verified data could only come from Russia's defense ministry, and that organization was claiming that Ukraine's drones had been destroyed. The situation on the ground showed that the attack was very real. News Sky quotes a taxi driver named Ivan P., who posted to a local community video blog in which he said, "I was leaving the parking lot near Moscow Ring Road at 3 in the morning. You see a flash in the sky, then some guy shouts, 'Run, drone!' Another second, a car nearby collapses. Debris flies," Ivan said. Another resident located in Kunsevo described their experiences. "There was a real feeling that the city was no longer protected. Before we thought it was somewhere in Kharkiv, in Kyiv, but now it's here, under my entrance. I gathered the children, sat under the bed, and in the morning, 3 cars were burning in the yard." And that's the point. Moscow is no longer protected, and its people know it. As for the damage caused during the strike, Ukraine has resisted providing any official comment. It's not trying to hide the fact that it's hitting Moscow. Anybody could see that these drones come from Ukraine. Rather, it seems that the country doesn't want to count any chickens before they're hatched. Plus, it may have other drone strikes planned and doesn't want to give any information away that could allow Russia to better defend itself in the future. In fact, that's almost confirmed. Newsky quotes an anonymous source within Ukraine's Ministry of Defense as stating, "This is just the beginning. The old doctrines no longer work. Drones are changing the global architecture of war. Now any metropolis cannot be indifferent." There's a warning in those words. Russia's far-flung cities are no longer safe as Ukraine brings the war that Putin started to his people. As for direct damage assessments, direct losses in terms of destroyed cars, cable lines, and other infrastructure have led to insurance claims in the region of $1.8 to $3.2 million being filed. Over 30 companies were affected by Ukraine's Moscow strike, Newsky says, including taxi fleets, airport providers, and car-sharing services. Mass cancellations within the city, along with flight delays, led to Moscow losing 40% of the revenue it typically generates in a single night. Ukraine didn't just cause damage to Russia's capital city, it cost Putin and his cronies a lot of money. And there's more. Outside of the Moscow strike, the Sun's YouTube channel reports that Ukraine launched a series of airstrikes targeting Tyokhino, which is in the Kursk region. It shares footage of several explosions in the region, suggesting Ukraine is battering Tyokhino to slow down Putin's summer offensive, which is targeting the northeastern region of Sumy. Who knows, perhaps Ukraine is also planning a second incursion into Kursk that could see it humiliate Putin even more than the July 20th attack on Moscow. The Sun says that Ukraine also destroyed 5 Russian armored vehicles that were attempting to attack the country's defenses in a strike that saw Ukrainian drones drop grenades directly onto the Russian attackers. Explosion after explosion was recorded, devastating Russian equipment in the process. What we have here is a series of Ukrainian strikes that have hit Russia hard. In Moscow, Ukraine has struck deep into the heart of Putin's regime, attacking his capital city directly to let Russia's leader know that he, his people, and his infrastructure aren't safe from Ukraine's counterattacks. And as Ukraine caused enormous damage in Moscow, it also defended itself with strikes against military targets in Kursk and on its own territory, relieving pressure on its forces in the process. There's no escaping reality for Putin. The weekend of July 19th and 20th belonged to Ukraine. There are several reasons why Ukraine's Moscow strike matters. The first is simple. Ukraine wanted revenge for the ever-intensifying airstrikes Putin has been launching on its territory. For much of 2025, Putin has been forced to watch as his ground forces fail to take the amount of territory he needs them to take to grant Russia's leader the leverage he needs in any future peace negotiations. That shouldn't be a surprise. Russia's forces are worn down, losing around 1,000 soldiers per day, according to CNN. Equipment problems are rife in Russia's military as Ukraine's defense has cost Putin over 23,000 armored vehicles, 11,000 tanks, and more than 30,500 artillery systems, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance. A weakening army on the ground has forced Putin to change his strategy. He's done just that by unleashing more drones than ever before against Ukraine. On June 10th, the BBC reported that Russia's record volume of drone strikes signaled a dangerous shift in the Ukraine war. It also shared some numbers, noting that the 3 months up to August 2024 saw Russia launch 1,100 drones into Ukraine. Then the numbers started rising. August alone saw 818 drones enter Ukraine's airspace. That was followed by 1,410 in September and over 2,000 in October. In May, Russia launched over 4,000 drones into Ukraine in a single month, handily beating its past records set during Putin's invasion. A month later, June's swarm of thousands of Russian drones led to 232 Ukrainians being killed, with a further 1,300 being injured in a single month. What we see here is a clear pattern. As Putin's ground invasion falters, he's sending more drones than ever before to target Ukraine's cities. Putin's plan is simple: create as much terror in Ukraine as he can to weaken his enemy's resolve. But Russia is failing to break Ukraine. Instead, Putin's drone hordes have prompted some changes in Ukraine's strategy. What we saw in Moscow on July 20th was that change in action. Ukraine is fighting fire with fire by launching its own drone waves, with some of its UAVs even targeting Russia's cities directly. Ukraine is giving Putin's people a dose of the medicine that Russia's leader has been feeding to Ukraine, which brings us to the next reason why the July 20th strike matters. Ukraine has just broken the promise Putin made to his own people. Putin has always positioned himself as the strongman of Russia's politics. The idea is simple. Putin claims that he's the only man who can defend Russia from nebulous invading forces, casting himself in the role of protector against all who would harm his country's interests. The Moscow Times made this clear all the way back in July 2013, writing that Putin sees himself as the only person who can ensure the survival of Russia by protecting its territorial integrity. It's under this guise that Putin makes his endless threats regarding supposed NATO expansionism. The Ukraine invasion was also justified in part within Russia by Putin claiming that taking Ukraine would protect Russia. July 20th revealed that Putin is an emperor without any clothes. The great protector and strongman of Russian politics has failed to stop a Ukrainian drone strike that has struck his country's capital. Ukraine was never supposed to be able to do anything like this. The country was supposed to roll over when Putin's forces invaded. Instead, it's not only defended itself for almost 3.5 years, but is actively attacking Russia. And that is bad news for Putin. Every successful Ukrainian strike inside Russia leads to him losing support for his invasion. News Sky points this out, noting that data from pollster the Levada Center is already revealing that Moscow's citizens are starting to get scared. It says that 66% of the city's residents feel stressed due to Putin's war dragging on far longer than any of them expected. Another 35% say that they're considering packing their suitcases and getting out of the city, perhaps to travel to regions of Russia that they believe Ukraine won't target. The Journal of Democracy provides more data suggesting that Russia's people are souring on Putin's war. It says that a November 2024 poll found that 57% of Russians favored a ceasefire with Ukraine. Only 35% of Russians, a little over a third of the population, supported continued warfare. Russians were even wary of Putin's war mere months after the invasion. The journal points to another Levada Center poll from September 2022, which discovered that 48% of Russians preferred the option of peace talks to the 44% who were in favor of fighting at the time. The point here is twofold. First, Putin has never enjoyed the support for his Ukraine invasion that he claims to have. The reality is that most Russians haven't wanted the war he's created from the start. Second, that sentiment among the Russian population is only going to keep growing as Ukraine launches more strikes on Russia's territory. The great protector, the strongman of Russian politics, has already failed to complete the quick, special military operation he originally planned. Now, each passing day of the Ukraine war brings more danger to Russia's people, making them even more opposed to Putin's war. That's what Ukraine wants. It's not accurate to claim that the July 20th strike will push Putin into reconsidering his war. It won't. However, it serves as yet another shot against Russia that the country's people won't ignore. Ukraine is chipping away at Putin's strongman image with these types of strikes. It will hope that July 20th, along with the success it's had in the past, and the many more strikes inside Russia that will come in the future, will eventually weaken Putin's position to the point where he has to stop the war. In the meantime, Ukraine will be happy with achieving a goal that it's pushed for throughout 2025, which brings us to the third reason why the July 20th strike matters. Russian airports were shut down. Again. We mentioned earlier that the closure of Russian airports isn't a side effect of Ukraine's strikes in Russia. It's an intended consequence, a strategy, and it's one that Ukraine has been using to great effect throughout 2025. We saw Ukraine use this strategy during the build-up to Putin's May 9th Victory Day parade, as it launched a series of strikes that led to widespread airport closures. Euronews reported at the time that 60,000 people had their trips delayed due to Ukraine's May strikes, which affected 300 flights. Delays and cancellations also sent a message to the world leaders attending the Victory Day parade. Ukraine can hit Russia at any time and could even hit the parade if it wanted. Of course, Ukraine didn't directly attack the parade itself. The geopolitical ramifications would have been too huge. But the airport closures have the much clearer purpose of costing Russia money. Novaya Gazeta pointed this out in its reporting on Ukraine's Victory Day strikes, noting that the airport closures in May alone likely cost Russia up to $12.78 million. The July 20th strike probably added several million more dollars to that number, and the pattern is clear. From the start of 2025 up to May 20th, Ukraine's attacks in Russian territory forced 217 airport closures, which is around 4 times the number of closures forced in 2023 and over double the closures forced in 2024. Of course, costing Russia money with these closures is great. However, Ukraine is using what's happening in Russia's airports to send constant reminders to Putin's people. Just as with its more direct strikes, it's showing that Putin isn't the great protector he claims to be. Each time a flight is grounded, Russia's people know it's happening because their country's air defense systems have been activated, and those systems will only be firing when there are Ukrainian drones in the vicinity. Again, it's that chipping away at Putin's armor that we mentioned earlier. Each time a Russian airport closes, thousands of people are reminded that the Ukraine war isn't limited to Ukraine's territory. Finally, there's the issue of peace to consider. Just a few days before Ukraine's Moscow strike, US President Donald Trump delivered a warning to Putin. Trump told Russia's leader that he had 50 days to reach a peace deal with Ukraine, or the US would respond with secondary tariffs against any nation that purchases Russian goods. That's a problem for Putin. He's keeping his war machine ticking over thanks to the billions of dollars Russia makes from the sales of its natural resources to countries like China and India. Trump is hoping that his tariffs will force those countries to reconsider who they buy from, which ultimately hits Putin hard in the pocketbook. However, Trump's warning to Putin came with a caveat delivered to Ukraine. The BBC said on July 15th that Trump reportedly said that Ukraine shouldn't target Moscow with a direct attack. 5 days later, that's precisely what Ukraine has done. Therein may lie a problem for Ukraine. If Trump is serious about not wanting Ukraine to hit Moscow, Ukraine going ahead and doing it anyway may sour the US president on Ukraine. That could put future peace negotiations at risk. It could also lead to Trump reconsidering his recent decision to work alongside NATO to provide Ukraine with the modern missiles and weapons it needs to defend itself against Russia's aggression. That deal will see NATO's European members spend billions of dollars on US weapons, which they then deliver to Ukraine. Could Ukraine have just damaged that deal with its July 20th strike? It's possible. Trump hasn't commented yet. What is clear is that Ukraine's July 20th strike represents a new escalation in the war. Moscow has been hit before, but never this hard and never so directly. Airport closures, destroying vehicles, and damage to Moscow's infrastructure all serve as a reminder to Putin that Ukraine can hit Russia's capital city whenever it wants. Perhaps that will force Putin to think twice as he continues to avoid calls to enter peace negotiations with Ukraine. And while Russia is dealing with all of these problems in Moscow, its fight inside Ukraine isn't going as Putin expected. Russia's 41st Army has completely collapsed as catastrophic losses have been leaked. Check out our video to learn more, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more videos covering the latest developments in the Ukraine war. And thank you, as always, for watching.